The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm Cheryl Hentz along with my guest co-host this evening, Mr. Paul Esslinger from the Oshkosh Common Council. Just before we started taping tonight's show, Tony Palmieri had an emergency situation come up and needed to attend to that. Paul was available, and it's a far cry when you don't have something to do on a Thursday night, right?
Absolutely.
That's a rare occasion. So anyway, Paul was good enough to be able to sit in for me tonight and tape a couple of shows with me. So thanks to him. And we're very pleased to welcome back to the show two members from our esteemed Oshkosh Area School Board. To my immediate left is Dan Becker, and to his left is Ben Schneider II. Thanks, guys, for being back here. We appreciate your coming on and talking to us about things going on in the district. One of the first places I want to start, and we've got a lot of different ground to cover tonight, but this consulting proposal that is before the district, there have been figures bandied about in the $250,000 range. And some people have disputed that it is that high, so we want to talk about that. But the consultant that has put forth the proposal is Blue Door Consulting. They've been working as a consultant for the district for how long? A year?
About a year and a half.
Yeah. A year and a half? Okay. And in that amount of time, they've been paid, my notes say, just over $30,000. Is that accurate?
That's an accurate number.
Okay. And so now they are putting forth a proposal to do more work for the district. Tell us what they're proposing that they do, for how long a period of time, and what the real cost is.
Well, the board, Cheryl, was presented in a workshop session at the last board meeting just a little over a week ago. The proposal at this time is to essentially do focus groups. They want to bring in a facilitator to accomplish that. I do have some concerns about that process. I guess the first of which is that the recommended facilitator, surprise, surprise, is a retired superintendent from another school district. My concern there is that there might be some preconceived or some bias in that process. Wasn't able to get a lot of questions in during the workshop session. I fully intend to ask a few rather pointed questions when this comes before the board for resolution. The history that he has, the board really wasn't providing, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Schneider, really wasn't provided a lot of details about this individual. Mr. Schneider was fortunate enough to sit on a committee to look at this individual, and even in that committee, it's my understanding there wasn't a whole lot of information provided. Are we looking at ultimately a referendum? I mean, is that what his thought process is? I don't think this community is ready for a referendum. Now, if the information comes back to the contrary, I certainly would be the first one to be surprised. But I've got some real concerns that, I mean, this might already be a done deal in terms of the recommendation, and I want to make sure that we actually do get the public input we were promised.
Well, well, first of all, I still don't know exactly what, for how long a period of time Blue Door wants to work for the district on this consultant basis and what it's going to cost. But, let's talk about the facilitator for just a second,
Sure.
and then we can, get the answers to those other two questions. Who do you think would be a suitable candidate to be a facilitator? Because I'm sure the argument is, who better to facilitate a focus group on a school district than, a retired or former superintendent?
I'd like to take that one. That's a tough question to ask because I don't have any experience facilitating a community engagement process in terms of generating a nice, sound, long-range plan. It's difficult to answer, and it's something almost you recognize. The committee in which I was asked to be a member on had two firms that answered our RFP. And initially, the RFP went out for a community engagement process, and then subsequent to that, it kind of evolved after the RFP went out and after the community, the committee discussions, it evolved into a kind of a strategic plan. So I wonder how many people, and actually there's, I believe, over 15 people that were asked to participate in the RFP, but I wonder how many people did not bother because they didn't want to just participate in the community engagement process. And I do share some of the concerns in the sense of, we were presented with two firms to select from. In fact, the board saw one, and I made the analysis, if I'm looking at buying a car and I only see two cars in the car lot and I don't like what I see, I'll probably keep looking. And we all recognize that we want to have a long-range plan. We want to engage the community in this dialogue, make sure that the plan represents the values and what the taxpayers can afford and have sound delivery of education. But there's some concerns. We'll vote on that in another, actually a week from yesterday. And back to your point in terms of the 250,000, Blue Door Consulting generated about 140 page marketing plan. Probably was about an 8-pound package, but anyway, they recommend that over a 5-year period, it should be our goal to, in 5 years, devote up to $250,000 towards marketing and public relations. And as you know, just a few short years ago, the board, in a reconciliation mode, cut a full-time PR position at the tune of probably around $85,000, $90,000 with benefits. So, to me, that's it's somewhat of a mixed message that we send if we do adopt that plan. Something I have some strong reservations on, because I think the best marketing plan is a sound educational plan, and those results should speak for themselves. But I guess we'll have to sort through a lot of those issues in the future.
Well, I guess I'm confused then. I mean, how did the board come full circle with, what was it, 3 years ago you had a PR facilitator, whatever you want to call a position, and then you got rid of him because I'm assuming you decided you couldn't afford that position anymore, and now you have this Blue Door Consulting saying that you need to hire this position again. How did you get full circle on that? I'm not understanding that.
I thought you were going to explain that to me.
Well, okay, maybe before you even answer that question, now I'm assuming that there was a vote on whether you should hire Blue Door Consulting on the board, correct?
Au contraire, Mr. Esslinger.
There was no vote to decide. Okay, now I'm really confused. Who decided that Blue Door Consulting was going to be the person that was the group that was going to facilitate this?
Each year, the district puts aside money for the use of consultants, and the administration took it upon themselves to expend some of those funds to.
Okay, but you
garner the
said that
services
there's
of Blue
been
Door.
over $30,000 expended on this so far. Don't you have in your bylaws that anything over $10,000 needs to come to the board for a vote? So
The answer is yes. However, the way administration or members of the district can get around that is if they
piecemeal it.
bill it in increments. And I think that was a mistake in terms of selecting such a large dollar consultant. I think that you want to see that you want to make sure you have buy-in from the district, because although I agree with many of the things going on in the district, I think that in this particular case you want to deal with someone that has strong expertise in the arena of public education. I will say this: I think they're leading us on a very nice, from what I see, a very nice package to develop a sound website, much like the City of Oshkosh. City of Oshkosh website, I think, is phenomenal, and our website is dated, and I think that is going smoothly. And the question of it's not is if we should do this; it's a question of who we should select, because we certainly need to have someone to guide us along the lines to improve our communications and reach parents and engage parents in the whole process, and taxpayers and non-parents. But yeah, it is a little troublesome when we do select consultants and pay that large of dollars. That was made aware to me by someone else when the board has really never even voted on that, and it was done under the radar screen of the $10,000 policy.
Did the administration at least put requests for proposals out for people that can do this job, or did they just handpick these people?
I presume that they were selected by Dr. Hellman, our superintendent. I have no information to indicate otherwise. So, and there are some things that you have to, you let our administration manage the district in the best way possible that he or she knows fit. But I think that is a pretty large item that when you're asking the school board to basically abide or embrace a marketing plan that they suggest will cost up to $250,000, I think you'd probably want to make sure the author of that plan has a lot of buy-in from the Board of Education.
I think so.
Let me ask you both gentlemen this question. Why does the Oshkosh Area School District need a consultant? Why does it need a PR person? We had Teresa Thiel on last week's show, and I asked her that very question. Teresa's not on the school board anymore, but she came on as a private citizen to talk about some things that had been said on a previous citizen show. But during the course of that conversation, she supports the PR, not necessarily the PR person, but she supports the marketing firm, the consultant firm. And so I asked her why we need a PR person, why we need a consultant, because Nina does an outstanding job of recruiting students, retaining students. Do they lose some? Of course, every district does. But your own school board, some of its members have, pointed to 10 miles north and said, look at Nina, look at Nina, look at Nina. And I say, yeah, let's look at Nina. And they're doing it without consultants, without PR people. Why does Oshkosh need one?
I mean, shouldn't we be focusing on education? How to teach my children, how to teach your children, and not. I mean, some of the suggestions that this Heidi Strand at Blue Door has come up with is change your logo, play nicey nice to the media, and now, I'm sure there are good things in this plan. I have a marketing degree. I understand marketing is a good thing, but increasing a budget by $250,000 over the next 5 years. You've already spent $30,000 on this group. That's going to increase. Are we getting off on an avenue that is just in nowhere land?
Well, I've said numerous times at the board level that I think the best marketing plan is a incredible educational plan, and you should let those results speak for themselves. And if you look at, and I know not everybody likes to look at solely test scores, and I don't think anybody looks solely at test scores, but if you look at in the Fox Valley, Kimberly is, they're the pinnacle, they're the flagship of the Fox Valley in terms of performance, results. And I think that should be, rather than spending $250,000 on marketing to tell people, hey, we should feel good because, we rank X out of 200 or 400 something districts. I think we should promote the educational and really focus on the educational missions. And Cheryl, to answer your question about, you asked about what are we going to accomplish. I don't know what we're going to accomplish with $250,000. I asked that question. How are we going to measure if we're going to get a bang for our dollar? We're spending $250,000, our target. What does that mean? Are we going to focus on retention, recruitment? Are we going to increase enrollment? Are we going to try to counteract the decline in birth rates? Are we going to try to reach more parents and work with parents to make that classroom experience better for students? There are many things we can do to make that a good investment. I think that's a little too large of a dollar amount, even though it's quote unquote only 0.25% of our budget. But I don't know what we're going to accomplish, and I haven't been asked to support that yet, and I'll have all those questions hopefully answered, or hopefully everybody will have those questions answered before we're asked to adopt a large plan.
Well, Teresa Thiel said that she feels that the district does not do a very good job tooting its own horn. That may very well be true. And I agree that the district should toot its own horn. This is a good district. It needs to get its message out. She also said that, one of the reasons that Nina may not need somebody in a position like this is because they already have a good reputation. That may be true too. She also suggested that, they may have people with more available time up in Nina. That may also be true. I mean, we don't know, but all those things that Mrs. Thiel said could be true. But I think that if, in these times when we are all strapped for cash, individuals and governmental bodies alike, I think that there are plenty of people out there who would, such as setting up a website, donate some time to this district. I write professionally for a living, and while some of the people in this district may not like me at all, maybe hate my guts, I went to school in this district, and I love this district as I love this community, and I have verbally told them I would be happy to donate some of my time to help with newsletters, to do any kind of PR or writing. And whether they like me or not, I'm good at what I do. And so there, I'm going to toot my own horn. The point being that whether it's Cheryl Hentz or Paul Esslinger or John Doe, I think that if you appeal to the people in this community, you might be able to find some people who will donate their time and work pro bono, if you will,
Cheryl,
to help the district out.
We just had, people pony up almost $7 million for a water park. There was obviously some people with some very, very deep pockets that decided that they either have children or they've had children, and this is something that we need. I'm assuming that there are people out in the district that think that education is important. Has Blue Door Consulting ever given thought, in their analysis that they've given you, have they talked about going out to groups trying to solicit funds for it? Because, Teresa Thiel, I think, said in her segment, that can be done. And I applaud that. If people want to give money, are we doing that, or do we just need to keep throwing money at things to try to eliminate a perceived problem?
To my knowledge, no money has been asked for from donors to this point, Mr. Esslinger, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. If this community has the expertise, and I believe it does, to provide some of these services pro bono, it promotes ownership within the community of the school district.
Right.
Schools in each of their separate neighborhoods are the center of that little community. And the more we can do to promote that, the better off our children are going to be, the better off our neighborhoods are going to be.
And I can only presume that we've looked at soliciting people to donate website development. I can only assume that. I would find it hard to believe that we wouldn't do that, and I certainly would be really extremely disappointed if we didn't. And back to this consultant, I think that any institution recognizes that there are areas of expertise that they just don't have. And I think it's not so much of we need a consultant for this area. I think we have to focus more on what all government has to do is moving forward, more shared responsibility. Public relations should be the job of everyone in the district. There's over 1,000 employees. We should all promote the district. I know some people think that if we say something that doesn't agree with, doesn't highlight a benefit of the district, that you're not promoting the district, when in fact maybe you just really love the district, you love the community that you live in, and you want to see the system excel. I know a few years ago the freshman failure rate was dismal, and that's something I talked about, and I'm very proud of the fact that people recognize, rather than just trying to saying, oh, we're going to, the community, or excuse me, the district and the board, put that as a priority. Hey, we got to address this. And unfortunately it got to the point where the board had to say we didn't address this, but public relations, I don't know if we need a consultant or a PR director. It should be something, maybe it should be a transportation director that does this, some other director of some other area in the school central office should also have that as part of their title. And you'd hope that, most people possess those types of skills where you can, in public relations and working with people and communicating your message.
Well, it just seems to me, and I'm just going to editorialize here for a moment because that's one of the things that I like to do. A couple years ago, you did away with a PR position to save money and to save additional money in benefits. And now the district is not only spending money on a consultant, but you're looking at using that consultant, keeping that consultant there, but using that consultant's ideas to rehire the very position that you did away with. So it's a double whammy that makes absolutely no sense, and it makes even less sense now because now we've got a property tax freeze. People have just been reassessed on their property, which is going to cost a lot of us a lot more money in taxes. And we don't know what's going to happen from the city budgetary standpoint. We don't know from the county standpoint. We don't know if we're going to have a county sales tax that's going to be put in place. And so this is an especially bad time to be doing not just a consultant, but rehiring a position you did away with. I mean, why can your cohorts on the board not see this?
Boy, when you put it like that, it's, boy, you make a really good case against it. But yeah, I think we all recognize that, again, we have to promote the public relations of the district. And I guess the question is, do we need to hire full-time people? And it seems like we are rolling back the clock, and we are kind of coming full circle.
And with a lot less money.
Yeah.
And I think as a parent now of a first grader, I think the most public relations are the teachers. I mean, we get direction from the teachers, and my child goes to Shapiro, and the teachers in kindergarten were phenomenal. Got a lot of information. Leaflets come home. This is what he needs to do. This is what we're gonna do. He's now in first grade, and we get that. So I'm just thinking that 95% of the communication that parents get in this district comes from the teachers, and from the 2 years now that I've been involved, we've had, in my opinion, phenomenal communication. So maybe I'm not understanding where we have this disconnect in communication in the school district. Do you guys see that? And if you do, where is it?
A lot of times, Mr. Esslinger, there is, to a certain extent, a little bit of a disconnect with those citizens that don't have children within the school district. We get a lot of individuals that come to plead a case that we find that they don't always have as much information as they should. Those are the individuals I'm worried about. I'm certainly not advocating for rehiring the PR consultant. I'm certainly not advocating for a long-term relationship with Blue Door, although I do think they bring some value to the district, but I'm still a little bit leery of the master plan. But information is key to the whole process, whether it be school board, whether it be, you might agree with city council, with county issues. The more informed public we can have, the better off everyone is. Everyone knows what's going on. Everybody's got a stake. Everybody's got something that they may want to throw their 2 cents in. And the more input we can garner, the better off everyone's going to be. The better decisions the board that's held responsible can make. Now, that being said, how we accomplish disseminating that information is another question. The website certainly goes a long way to getting that information out there. I would argue there's probably not a whole lot of households in this community any longer that don't have internet access of some sort, or
that have children anyway.
Exactly. So I think once we can get a new website up and running, we can get a lot of that information out to the public as a whole. And again, that's to everyone's benefit.
I want to shift gears here a little bit. When Ms. Thiel was on, we were talking about efficiencies and where things can be cut. And I brought up I think it's a fact that the administration has found $700,000 or $800,000 that surplus. Ms. Thiel made the statement that we are at the bone. We cannot cut anything more. Yet we have this surplus of $800,000, and I guess the question that I had for her, and maybe you can answer this, if we have this $800,000 extra, did you take too much money from me, and can you analyze why do we have that $800,000, and just, I guess, expound on that. Should we give it back, or should we spend it on a program, or just comment on that?
Yeah, well, as you recall, the last year's tax bill, the school board raised the property taxes a little over 9%. And at that time, there were board members, including, well, I believe Mrs. Steele wasn't on the board at that time, but there are some board members that thought we weren't doing enough. And it's the flaw not so much in the tax rate or what the surplus is. It's a flaw in budgeting. It's and I've advocated we should do zero-based or needs-based budgeting. Rather than taking last year's number and maybe just put an inflation factor. And clearly this demonstrates when we have over $730,000 surplus after a 9% tax levy increase that we overtaxed. And for those that say we're not taxing enough and we need to tax more, we're going to tax more surplus, take it out of our pockets to put it in the district's coffers. I don't want government managing my money. Tax what you need and deliver education in a sound manner. And we all get caught up in dollars and cents and, oh, we're undertaxing versus other districts. Well, as I pointed to Kimberly being the flagship, they spend less than we do, but they're beating us across the board. And Minnesota now, for the first time in 10 years, beat us on the ACT, and they spend less than we do.
Well, Miss
So-
Hill brought that up. She said we were 394th out of 420 or
Yeah,
something like
can I
that.
interrupt you though? Maybe there's a reason why Mrs. Steele's no longer on the board. Her ideas were defeated, and maybe if she was on the board, maybe I'd feel the need to respond more to her comments. But you know, her ideas are intellectually flawed, and if she wants to run for re-election, saying, "Hey, I'm a tax and spend candidate again," and 9% levies are reasonable, let her. But people, hope, are paying attention that we're taxing at record percentage increases and record dollars, and we're having incredibly large surpluses. And I really hope people watch what we're going to do with that surplus. I advocate we return it back to the people that provided us, the taxpayers.
Return it back or just levy less next year.
Well, it's kind of the same, you know, because by returning it back, that means our
You're gonna
5% increase. But, you know, obviously, if we're going to levy less next year, then we're going to have to restrict programs. But I think rather than putting that in our fund balance, which is already very healthy, it's almost 10% of our general fund revenues. I think we should return it back versus accelerate or invent some programs that we need to do that in the future we may not be able to fund because of other uncertainty. So anyway, but that's I keep hearing that, well, we're not taxing enough, and you hear that every year, and then we have a surplus. So I guess maybe I should ask the two of you, since you're plugged in pretty good, does that make any sense?
It didn't mean.
It doesn't
no.
to me.
Okay.
No.
I think it's quite simply it's who's better to spend the money, the board, the school district, the city, the county, whatever the governmental body, or the person that earned that dollar in the first place. It really comes down to in whose best interest is that dollar best served.
Mm-hmm.
Is it better in your pocket or is it better in the school district's budget? I'm certainly an advocate for returning as much of that money to the taxpayers as is possible. I mean, there's certainly some things the district can do with it to save money long term, but given these economic times, at this point anyway, I would advocate that surplus would be returned
Okay,
to
so,
offset the levy.
and I think Paul and I would concur with that.
Yeah.
But, you know, we all know how things work. That's not going to happen. I mean, do you guys actually think that you're going to find support on that board to return that money to the taxpayer in one form or another?
You know, it's interesting. We had this discussion yesterday at a committee level, and I asked the question, because there was a little resistance, and I asked the question, would you have knowingly voted for a 9% levy increase if you knew that a $746,000 surplus would have resulted? And of course the answer was no. So then conversely, why wouldn't you return that? So I think that there is support. I think that there's also a lot of board members are anxious. They want to, if they get, they want to make next year's budget cycle easier. So it's easy to have a big fund balance, and you can keep on maybe, let's use that for roof repairs, so that general fund money doesn't go from roof repairs the next year. I think it'll be a close vote. I think we'll probably have a compromise. We may not return all of it, but hopefully we can reach a compromise to return a good portion, so the taxpayers know that, we recognize it's their money, return it back, and the money, as Mr. Becker pointed out, it's better suited in their hands.
Well, I would hope that would come to fruition. I really do. And I would also hope that the people who are voting in favor of returning that money to the taxpayers do so because they feel it's the right thing to do, not because they may be running for re-election and want to make themselves look good. Because that's a very distinct possibility too.
And I should point out that Mr. Becker is the only one that's running for re-election that didn't support the 9% tax levy increase. So
That did not.
props to this guy right here.
Now you are running again?
I am definitely running again. I'm not so sure about the other two members of the board that are up for
And now who's
re-election.
up? You?
Myself,
Ms.
Dennis
Weinstein,
Kavanaugh, and
Dennis.
Amy Weinstein.
Okay, all right. So, what can we expect in the way of a tax increase for the coming year?
It looks like it's just under 5%, and depending on what the surplus, how that's applied, it could be as little, and my numbers are a little vague, but it could be as little as a 1% increase. And I want to be very clear. It's for me, and and I believe, Mr. Becker, I'm sure agrees, is it's not so much the number, it's the process. What process do we abide by that results in these increases? And again, I see a flaw in the way we budget. And I see a flaw in the way all governments budget. You know, we keep hearing, oh, we got to cut all the fat, and oh, there's nothing else to cut. We're cutting into muscle. Well, if we're cutting into muscle, we wouldn't have ginormous. It's not a word, but I like it. Gargantuan surpluses. And man, this is a real tough problem to have. I don't know what the Common Council's surplus is, but $745,000, and it's not because we streamlined operation mid-year. It's because we got more revenue than we thought. And it would be great if we streamlined revenue, because then it would apply to next year. So I want to be really clear. It's not so much, 9% is bad. It's the process that leads to that. That's what has me most concerned.
One thing that I know, Mr. Schneider, you're on the Facilities and Finance Committee, and one thing that's come up there is the analysis of South Park Pool. When Ms. Thiel was on here, I broached that question with her. She was in favor of getting rid of the South Park Pool. Now she's in favor of it. And she explained that the reason she was in favor of getting rid of it initially is because basically you were sold a bill of goods. You were told that you were going to save $100,000 on it, and that did not come to fruition. I'm just wondering if you have any numbers on that, and what are your thoughts on South Park Pool? Should we keep it running, or should it be mothballed?
If I may, I find it rather surprising. I sat in on the same meetings as Mrs. Thiel leading up to that vote, and the information I recall is that we were told it would save us $30,000. Correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
Mr. Schneider. I also find it a little suspect that, in fact, Mrs. Thiel voted to close South Park Pool at a time when, again, I could be wrong on this, her children weren't at South Park, but now that her children are at South Park and are being deprived of that facility or that service, now she comes out and is pushing quite hard to get that facility reopened. A little too convenient in my mind.
And you know, that is a tough issue in terms of what should be done with that pool. There's 5 middle schools in this district, and South Park is the only school that has a pool. And in terms of a bill of goods, I think it was some aggressive assumptions. And the fact is, you have to staff that pool. You have to clean around the pool because of, you have to, on a recurring basis, you have to change the filters. The biggest savings, I think, was in terms of custodial and cleaning the lockers, and also energy to heat the pool, because I think the pool's kept at a much lower, I think it's probably heated, but it's at a much lower level. Actually, I doubt if it's even heated because it's air temperature, but what should be done, I don't know. It's a shame that it's a wonderful pool. It's a shame we're in this situation. And of course, people will say, well, take that surplus. Well, we have to focus on, in my opinion, preserving the core areas, and then we kind of build from there. And I floated, because we discussed this in the Facilities and Finance Committee, I floated the idea, if South Park really is committed to keeping that pool open, I would ask that they would come back to the committee and offer some site-based funds, because again, not 4 other middle schools don't have that, but conversely, some other, every school has perhaps something that's different, but. So I guess I'm somewhat wishy-washy. I hate to see it closed, but I hate to see us open it up and having to cut some other, be a reading specialist in the following year. So it's certainly not a necessity, as a textbook's a necessity, but it is a beautiful facility, and it'd be sinful to throw a bunch of concrete in there, and that's a permanent solution. So yeah. Administration recommended that we close it down, and until I hear a good reason on how we can pay for it long term and be sustainable, I'm not going to change my position, which I originally voted to close it.
Okay.
I want to shift gears yet again, but still keeping on budgetary issues. A few days before we taped this show, Representative Greg Underheim was over at the university talking about the UW system and that kind of thing. And he said K through 12 is taking 44% of the resources, and basically he is advocating that the university system try to divert some of the money to its own coffers that is currently going into K through 12 education. How do you guys feel about that? You know, they've got a property tax freeze, we're getting less shared revenue, and now he wants to take more money from K through 12.
So he wants to take more money from K through 12 and divert it to the university system?
Underheim explained that the general purpose revenue goes to a handful of target areas, including higher education. However, K through 12 takes up 44% of that budget. And he proposed decreasing the amount of money spent on K through 12 by using technology in schools and decreasing the number of teachers.
Well, actually, I'd like to talk about that first. I think I'm a firm believer in just because we spend money on something, it doesn't mean that we're getting results. And I know if you look at Governor Doyle's campaign speeches and his partnership with WEAC, it's all about, hey, we're spending more money per pupil allotment, and that's what a lot of elected officials do. They want you to think, hey, I support this because I spend money on it. And the real concern is, are we getting a value? Are our kids learning? Are our kids prepared for the next phase of their life? Are third graders prepared for fourth grade, et cetera? I personally think that the funding that we get, we spend over $8,000 per child. I think it's adequate. The real problem is so much of that dollar is gobbled up by salary and benefits. And I'm not going to complain about the salary we pay our staff. The benefits are what we offer our staff. And 85% of the budget's salary and benefits. And I know people don't like when I talk about it, but we always seem to try to balance the budget on the other 15%. But we need to control retiree health insurance. It's almost $2 million of our budget, 2% of our budget. We need to control a lot of out-of-control Cadillac benefits. And people are going to need to, and this needs to come from the state, because we have mandates. We got to offer our staff 3.8% for over 800 staff members. We need to have some laws passed where we're not mandated in what we pay people with a variable revenue stream. And I agree with Mr. Underheim, and I think he really was the one that highlighted the Kimberly School District, how they can deliver so much better results with less money. I think we should leverage technology. And again, we're in decline enrollment. Decline enrollment means we should have less staff. And it seems like public education is the only area in which it's bad to have fewer staff members. You talk about in the city, downsize. Governor Doyle even talks about it, how he's restricted the state government by X number of employees. And hey, good job, Doyle, but in education, you can't do that. Well, if I'm concerned for my kids' learning, do they have enough, I'm concerned about the quality of my classroom teachers. So I think there's a lot of good in what he says.
What do you think would be an adequate amount of money to spend per pupil on public education? Well,
we need to get control again of our benefits and our our retiree costs. And I'd like to put that in line with what the private sector gets, our 90 sick days. And I know people don't like me saying that because it's not a huge cost, but it's a terrible perception. We pay retirees over $1,000 a month retiree health insurance premium. I don't know when you retire from the city what type of retiree health insurance package you get. We pay, it's way out of line with the private sector. And I'd like to realign those to the private sector because, again, that's 85% of the budget. And then I'd like to see what that realignment saves, and then I'd answer your question. But I don't have a specific dollar amount.
Well, I think the question's already been answered, Mr. Schneider, and getting back to some of the comments Mr. Steele made on last week's program, there is money in the benefits program in the school district that can be saved. We, not too long ago, 2.5 years ago, bid out health insurance in the district. And it was ascertained that we could save $2.5 million. Now, she is correct in her statement that we would have to get our unions to agree to that. But I would argue that the differences are so minute between the current or status quo health insurance plan and what was proposed that there was very little harm done to anyone by making that switch. But yet, we could save $2.5 million and return some of that money to the taxpayers, return some of that money to programs to more adequately educate our children.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think it's irresponsible of our negotiating groups not to continue to push for that solution. It's an easy fix. No one's harmed. Everyone's held harmless. And even if they are harmed, it's so minute, I would argue, it doesn't make that much difference. To implement small copays, to implement an extra $5 for a copay on a prescription. Those type of things, when they can return premium dollars in the tune of thousands and thousands that we can use to educate children, that in my mind is irresponsible to both the children and the taxpayers.
Well, her argument is, and I agree with this somewhat. She said if teachers are going to give concessions in their salary and their benefits, it'll free up money, but what guarantee do those teachers have that the money that they just freed up is actually going to go to something that the children need? You have a liberal Board of Education. I'm saying we do now, but if you did, and money just got wasted on things that really were not for the needs of the children, then essentially those teachers who earn their money, my mother was a teacher for 40 years, my brother's a teacher now, they earn their money. And I guess my argument, though, is we are in times where everyone earns their money, but we have to be happy we have a job. So, what do you say to, okay, let's free up some money if we have concessions, but there's no guarantee where that money's going to go?
Well, the point is, and you made it yourself, Mr. Esslinger, is that if we don't get some concessions from unions, and again, I would advocate to make them as as minuscule as possible, we're going to have to, and we're going to be forced to lay off teachers where and when we can. So it's tipping the scale one way or the other.
You concur with that, Mr. Schneider?
Well, I'm still stuck on that. Well, what guarantee we're going to have if that money's going to go back? I don't know what that means, and I really don't care to respond too much to what you said. But since you asked, I'll respond to you.
Well, but I think in Mrs. Thiel's defense, she is still a taxpayer in this district, and therefore I think she, as well as any taxpayer, deserves a response.
Yeah, I was being facetious. So I would have gotten around to it, Cheryl.
Okay. Well, I just want to make sure that you do.
Yeah. I don't know what the guarantee you have. The only guarantee you have is staff get increases every year. Teachers get 3.8% increases, total package every year. It's a commitment. It's a commitment of we need to work together to make sure that our district is the most efficient entity possible so we can continue with educational excellence, continue to deliver worthwhile programs in a meaningful, in a sound environment, and at the same time be an environment which the taxpayers can afford. But I think we are so far past, and I don't know how many people look forward to open up their tax bill, but we are so far past the point of the threshold of pain, in my opinion, on our level of taxation on property taxes, and now the county board wants to implement a 0.5% sales tax. Deal with the real problem, which is your revenue doesn't keep pace. Your ability to tax does not keep pace with the guaranteed increases on 85% of your budget, which is salary and benefits. Address that. Don't just keep saying, well, geez, we need to tax the max. But we have $746,000 surpluses, but we're not taxing enough. It doesn't make any sense. And address the real problem. And that's back to Mr. Unheim. I don't know if you voted for the QEO law, which guarantees what you have to pay your staff in some instances. But state legislature needs to lighten up on these meet-arb laws, so we don't have to look at comparables, because everybody just keeps trumping each other. And you paid them 3%, or you got to pay them 3.2. Well, there's no incentive for, and our administration leads our negotiations. Well, there's no incentive for anybody to be responsible for the taxpayers' dollars, except a few local elected officials.
Let's talk about our state representatives, Carol Rossler, Greg Underheim. I guess the question I have is, do these people understand school board issues? Do they understand city council issues? Do they understand county board issues? You may know I wrote a letter to those two individuals. I wanted council members to sign it to actually bring them to a council meeting to explain things that are going on in the state. Council member at that time, Brian Peschel, signed it. The rest of the council said, I'm not signing this. This is, you're trying to be nasty and you're trying to be negative and all that garbage. And it's like pulling teeth to get them to a council meeting. Have they ever been to a board meeting? Probably not. Have they been to a county board meeting? Probably not. They're making decisions down in the state of Wisconsin that completely affect us. Three of us here at the table trying to make very, very tough decisions.
Four of us at the table.
Three
of you making
the three elected officials. So, I guess the question, this long rambling speech here is, do these people that are making decisions at the state that impact us really know what they're doing?
Well, not to throw yet another example out there, but Dean Cofford, from Nina actually did serve as a school board member. So I would hope that Dean does have a good grasp of some of the issues that are faced at least the school board level. But I too, Paul, would certainly like to see Greg Underheim at a school board meeting. I too would like to see Carol Ressler at a school board meeting, at a city council meeting, at a county board meeting, just for if you will, a state of the state.
Right.
Just so that we're apprised on as a real-time basis as is possible what they're up to and what they're going to be doing that may or may not affect us long term.
And I was told by, I think it was at the time Mayor Harris, we deal with these people behind closed doors. This is how things get done. And you can see how
The public
effective
still
that
needs
has
to
been.
know. Yeah.
Well, I think when you've been in politics as long as they have, I would hope, I know they understand the issues. And it's not so much, it's really, do elected officials have the ability to stand up to the special interest groups? Because, are you in their camp? I know I had unions, or I had the teachers union spend $600 against one of my fellow candidates in the last election to buy yard signs, and I saw some of them putting in yard signs in people's yards. Well, they don't, let's deal with the real problem, and sometimes you have to give up something. And I think back to the quote with JFK. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Let's start looking at it from a more holistic standpoint, not just always saying, I want to get the money. I'm going to be first in line for the revenue, and let's throw the scraps to the programs. And that's not how we can operate. And I commend, for example, getting off a tangent, what Mark Harris did. If I heard him correctly, and I'll see if he will follow through, but if I heard him correctly, he's going to freeze the accumulation of sick days. I believe he was freezing salaries, and I commend that.
He doesn't have a choice.
Well, but the thing is, we don't have a choice either. But I haven't heard our superintendent offer that. I mean, we have board members complain about QEO. That's a guaranteed total package for teachers. However, we have a board policy that 5 board members won't change that guarantees administrators that same increase. So board members publicly complain about QEO, but they do nothing about what I call QEO for administrators. And we have a choice. Our superintendent could lead that way, but there's 40 other administrators that perhaps wouldn't agree with that. And I think, I know we've taken real small symbolic stances and say, hey, we're not going to take our whopping increase 3% on the board level on our $2,100 salary, but people need to start looking at, let's be more efficient with our dollars. And just because other people subsidize, it doesn't mean it's right. And we all want what's best. We all have a different path to get there, and I think that's a reasonable path that Mr. Becker highlighted with the insurance.
Let's talk about the 17 early release dates. There was a letter that was sent out by Jan Heller, the executive assistant for the Oshkosh Area School District. And this letter, it went out to a bunch of people from the school district. And the letter, it was a copy of a letter that originated with Dr. Heilman and was going to the various clergy in the city. Can you, either one of you, it doesn't matter who, enlighten the viewers about what the letter to the clergy was all about? And, because it did tie in with the release times. So whoever wants to field
Well,
that.
in short, the letter laid out that the school district will do whatever it can to play nice with the clergy, because Wednesdays is typically a church night. I, for one, my son attends Catholic education at St. Raphael's on Wednesday evenings. There's some conflicting times. We've got to do whatever we can now that we're in this situation to play nice with the public. As I think you both know, I was never in support of early release on Wednesdays. I think it's a bad idea. But given the fact that we're in this situation, we got to do what we can to minimize the fallout from it. And I think this is a step towards that end.
And so the letter basically said what?
I don't have the luxury of having.
I can read it.
Well, I could have read it, but
Oh.
I thought you could just
Why
give
don't you
us
sum
a
it up for us, Cheryl?
concise answer.
Yeah. I'm sorry. That's it's really kind of sad that we're sending out letters to clergy because we're burdening parents with early release times, and we're dipping into cannibalizing potentially something as important as a religious night, and we're also concerned about sports and practices and people being late, and we got to send out letters. It's at what point in time did we just kind of get derailed? There are some things, and when I voted no, I said this. There are some things in this district that we just don't. We have to protect, and I think we have to protect. We have to respect parents have relatively rigid schedules. A lot of people work shift work. Now they got to get off of work early at 1:50 at a 2:45 end time school, 17 times a year. And there's a gentleman that works at a major employer in town that said he had to burn like 2 weeks of vacation to accommodate that. We should accommodate parents, not the system. Not accommodate the system. The system is us. And that was just frustrating. And as Mr. Becker pointed out, we're trying to make the best of the situation. But boy, if we're gonna have early releases, have it on Fridays or something, and
Well,
Wednesdays.
and rather than just sort of teasing the audience, I'll just give you the nutshell paragraph here. First of all, it discusses, why the early release times and why there's this need for collaboration time. And then it says, in order to provide time for religious education in the past, athletic practice and other after-school activities have been required to be ended by 6 p.m. on Wednesdays. We'd like to ask your indulgence, and again, this went out to the clergy in the city. We would like to ask your indulgence to have these practices continue to 6:30 p.m. so that any teachers who are coaches will be able to participate fully in collaboration as well as fulfill their coaching duties. And then it says, if this isn't possible, yada, yada, yada. But, I think you summed it up best.
Mm-hmm.
It's a shame that we're having to dip into everybody's pocket, so to speak, for certain things, whether it's a financial pocket or it's a time pocket. Everybody seems to be asking for concessions of the little guy, and now concessions of the clergy. And do your fellow board members not feel any responsibility to we, the taxpayers?
I think it's pretty obvious, Cheryl, when you get 630 give or take people come to the board and say,
And they'll
please don't
dispute that
do this
number.
to me, and they slam the door right in their face.
They'll
They got the
dispute-
Bohica treatment, really.
But they'll
It's
dispute that
pathetic.
number. They'll dispute that there were 600 and some
So how can you
signatures.
dispute that?
Well, I suppose if you sat there and counted them, some weren't in
Well,
the
okay.
district.
They busted some
Okay,
people.
it was a large
Give or
sum.
take a few.
Yeah, they busted some people from Milwaukee. They handed out some cigarettes.
But-
Pringles, yeah.
And,
But I think the biggest slap in the face was Amy Weinstein coming forward and saying, they weren't at the meeting when this was discussed. I'm not going to worry about
Not
these
everybody can
signatures
show up on a Wednesday.
petition.
Yeah.
That was the biggest slap in the face of all. And Amy Weinstein should be, ashamed of herself for even making a
Can I?
comment
And
like
that's
that.
why this next election, I'm really curious because there's a lot of different viewpoints that may be debated during the next election. Mr. Becker's on one side, and you have Mr. Kavanaugh and Mrs. Weinstein on the other side, and very on opposite sides of the polls on many issues. But the real thing I'd ask your audience to keep in mind is last year we were told, when this was approved, that despite we should have taken this to the public, we should have got input. Despite that, we're going to support it, but in the future, we're going to really solicit that input. And I think our public relations consultant would agree we should solicit community engagement and input on that. So this is a negotiated item with the teachers union. I really would hope that the board majority that supported this, and we're all the board, that we honor what we said that we're going to do, and which we advocated we should have done all along, is let's get input. Let's put this on the agenda. Let's have a workshop. Let's have public forum. And let's find out if people support this. People support the collaboration. That's not the issue. It's the manner in which it's achieved. It costs, for many people that have after-school care, $5 per day per child. We have 2 children. That's an extra $170 that I have to pay to accommodate the system on top of my 9% levy increase. And can I have a little of my surplus back? And I don't know why I did this. It's like people even know what this means for a fact. But so, I hope we can work together to solve what I think is a burden for so many.
Quick question. You guys currently serve 3-year terms.
Correct.
Would you be in favor of 2-year terms?
I would. In fact, I made some phone calls about what that would take to try to get that accomplished, and I got conflicting answers from credible areas, and it'd be a simple majority from the board, and also 10% of the last gubernatorial vote.
Who do you contact to get the ultimate answer on that?
Well,
could you do that?
Yeah, I could.
Because, I mean, would you be in favor? Well, you said you would. Mr. Becker?
I certainly would be in favor of it. I think it does nothing more than promote involvement. Certainly the more people we can get to run for school board, the more viewpoints we're going to get, the more ideas we're going to get out there.
Because, I mean, you guys are kind of on an island. The Common Council is 2 years. County Board is 2 years. And to, quote, get rid of someone you don't like on the school board, it's going to take you 3 years to get rid of that person, basically.
Trying to get rid of me?
Well, I'm not going to comment on that publicly.
Well, and I want to be clear. I have about over 2.5 years left, so I want to be on record as saying I support 2-year terms.
Right.
And because I would have a 6-month grace period if I didn't support that. But I would, if someone came to me and said, "Hey, sign this or author this resolution," it just seemed to me that I needed just a plethora of signatures, a gargantuan amount of signatures to accomplish that. And that's not something that I think I could do on my own.
See, the school boards in Neenah and Menasha, well, I shouldn't say for certain Menasha, I believe it's Menasha as well, but for certain in Neenah, their school board terms are 3 years also, but their common council is also 3 years. They've got 3 districts and then a couple folks in each district. No, they have no at large. No, but their terms are 3 years apiece for their common council members. So maybe that's for consistency purposes with everything else. I don't know. But in making some calls, what did you find with other school districts? I mean, are they mostly 2 years, 3 years? What are they?
I called right around the election, and I think I might even, anyway, I called right around the election time, and I purposely thought about that, and I was going to bring it back after the election because I didn't want it to be an election issue, and it looked like I was electioneering. That was like 9 months ago.
You don't remember, in other words?
I don't
Okay. That's all right.
I mean, what was the question? I forget.
That's
Sorry.
fine. Okay. Very quick parting thoughts from either one of you in about 15 seconds apiece.
Word to the general public: stay involved, stay informed, keep an eye on us. There are certain board members out there that need an eye, to use your quote, Cheryl. We're keeping an eye out for the public, but please have the public keep an eye on us.
Yeah, and I would just encourage people to get involved, and if people want to run for election, school board seems to be a really low turnout in terms of candidates, and I think the more people running, the better. We had a primary last election. I think that's great for democracy, and if someone wishes to run, give me a call, give Mr. Becker a call, and we'll tell you how to run.
Okay, very good.
Can I get one of you two to run for Common Council?
Thanks very much for both of you being here
Appreciate the
this evening.
opportunity,
We
Cheryl.
appreciate it. And Paul, thanks again
pleasure.
for pinch hitting on some really, really short notice. I think it was an hour or less. So, and thanks as always to you for joining us and letting us into your home for the last hour. We'll see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.